In the middle of the sad and heavy feeling at Rob Reiner's funeral, when everything seemed set up to go through the grief in a neat and orderly way, Sally Struthers suddenly showed up. Her name wasn't on the guest list. Nobody was expecting her to come in. Her being there right away made the whole room get even quieter and stiller. When Sally stood up to talk, her voice shook a little, but it didn't break. Her words came out like they had been held inside for way too long, letting out the deepest secrets from her heart. Things she could never say while Rob was still alive. Sally said she had loved Rob since the days of All in the Family, in a quiet and real way, so deeply that she never asked for her feelings to be loved back. But everything changed when Rob married Michelle. The phone call stopped, the closeness went away, and Rob turned distant and cold, like a totally different person. The last time they met, Rob had said something she would never forget. "I'm slowly dying inside this house. I'm afraid my son will become a monster." Even so, Sally never blamed Rob. Over the many years that went by, even after Rob had left this world, Sally kept loving him just like she did at the start. Only now it was a love that had made it through everything painful, but never went out. After Rob and Michelle passed away, Jake and Rami almost lost track of day and night. The house in Brentwood, already quiet, now felt even emptier. Every corner seemed to hold the leftover breath of their parents. They decided to have a funeral without any show, just serious enough to say goodbye to two people who had lived quietly but deeply. Jake handled the plans while Rami was almost totally worn out, crying as she wrote the guest list, her tears dropping onto familiar names, as if each letter hurt like a new cut. The funeral happened at the small chapel at the end of the street where Rob said to stop every morning. Jake only invited people who were really close. A few old friends who had shared coffee with Rob and Michelle for years, the neighbor who helped him fix the roof during a storm, and a few far-off relatives they hadn't seen in years, but who still held his memory in their hearts. Rami hesitated a lot before calling each person, her voice shaking as she said, "Rob and Michelle, my parents are gone. If you can come to see them off one last time." On the day of the funeral, the sky was lead gray. No rain came down, but the air felt heavy, like it could break any second. Two dark wooden coffins sat in the center of the chapel, covered in white and pale purple flowers, colors Rob had once called beautiful in a sad way. The ceremony started in almost total silence. The organ played slowly, each note stretching out like a last breath that hadn't fully gone away. Jake bowed his head, his hands clasped tight, his teeth clenched to keep from falling apart. When the officiant read Rob's name, his voice was steady, yet every syllable seemed to push hard on the chests of everyone sitting there. When it was time to speak, Jake stepped forward, his legs feeling heavy like lead. He stood there a long time before getting out his first sentence. Rob was not a man of many words, but he taught us how to live through his silence. His voice cracked, his eyes got red. In the seats below, Rami could no longer hold it in. She broke into loud sobs, her hand over her mouth, but unable to stop the broken gasps. However, what made the whole ceremony pause, almost like it couldn't breathe, came from a moment nobody saw coming. Sally walked into the chapel. In just a few quick seconds, all eyes turned to her, as if everyone felt that this uninvited person brought a story that had never been told. Sally Struthers showed up like a crack in a ceremony that had been serious, and closed tight. Just as the organ finished a long-held note, the heavy wooden door at the back of the chapel slowly opened, making a dry, harsh sound that made several people turn around in surprise. No one thought any more guests would come. The list was closed, the memories set so grief could go on in an orderly way. And there she stood, thinner than people remembered, dressed in black, her face pale with feeling. A soft wave of whispers went through the seats. Some knew her right away. Others needed a few seconds to believe what they saw. Rami froze, her hand on her lap suddenly gripping tight, while Jake frowned hard, not sure what was going on. Sally looked at no one. She lowered her head and walked slowly down the center aisle of the chapel, as if each step pulled along a piece of an old, painful past. As she passed Jake and Rami, Sally stopped for a moment. Her voice was very soft, almost fading into the air. "I know I wasn't invited, but I couldn't not come." Rami didn't answer, only looked at Sally with a face both confused and heavy, as if she was trying to decide if she should feel angry, sorry, or just helpless. Sally sat down in the very last row alone, her hands clasped together. Her shoulders shook a little, even as she tried to stay quiet. When the officiant kept reading the goodbye words, Sally bowed her head lower than anyone else, tears falling onto the backs of her hands without wiping them away. To her, Rob was not just a name said in ceremony. He was a memory, a part of her life that had drifted far, yet never really gone. When it came time for the moment of silence, Sally suddenly stood up. Once again, the whole chapel moved. She took a deep breath, her voice shaking but clear. "I'm sorry for interrupting. I just want to say a few words." Sally Struthers stood in front of the wooden lectern for a long time before she talked, as if just saying the words out loud might make everything break. She looked down at the coffins, her eyes red but dry, her voice low and unsteady. "No, we first met in 1970, Sally said, when Norman Lear cast me as Gloria, and Rob had already been picked to play Michael Meathead Stivic. The first time I walked into the script reading room, I saw him sitting there with long hair, a bright smile, and smart eyes. I was young, just in my early 20s, while Rob already had the confidence of someone who knew he was going to do something big. She said the early days of filming were crazy and tiring, but Rob was always the one who made things lighter. He liked to tell silly jokes, sometimes on purpose to bug people." Sally smiled a little, the smile crooked with tears. But Rob was also the one who would turn to me when I was worried and say, "Hey, it's okay, we're all in the same boat." To her, that closeness happened naturally without ever needing a name. Sally admitted that they talked about way more than just the script. Between takes, they would sit on the steps behind the set, sharing cold coffee and bits of normal life stories. Rob listened. She said, her voice catching. He really listened as if everything I said mattered. That was what made her feel safe and also what let her heart go too far. Over the 8 seasons, Sally and Rob got so close that they were always together on set. They practiced lines together, laughed together, and worked together to change the script so the audience would laugh more. Sally remembered one time when Rob pulled her aside and said, "Sally, if you can put the success of the whole series above your own part, you'll never be sad about losing a few lines." That advice, Sally said, changed her career forever. She paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and then said something she had never said out loud in public all those years. "I liked him very much," she said softly, her voice a bit choked. "I sent him candy before every stage performance. We went out to dinner together and laughed late into the night." Once Rob told me that Penny Marshall, his wife at the time, was a little jealous because I kept laughing with him, kept hugging him. Rob laughed and said, "Penny thinks you and I have something going on." I just laughed it off because no matter how much I liked him, I knew it was only a quiet, unspoken feeling. Sally said there were days when she got to the studio early on purpose just to see Rob walk in, his jacket loose over his shoulders, that familiar smile on his face. He once asked me, "Why are you so quiet today?" And I answered, "It's nothing." She let out a soft laugh and shook her head. The truth was, there was a lot, I just didn't dare say it. Over time, the feelings inside Sally quietly changed. That secret young crush with no place and no name was slowly put away, making room for a different kind of connection. Steadier, less painful, more like brother-sister love than wanting. Sally learned how to stand by Rob without expecting anything. How to smile when he was happy in his own way. It was not giving up, but a quiet kind of growing up where the heart knows when to step back so no one gets hurt, including itself. When she talked about the filming years, Sally always remembered Penny with a sad but kind smile. Penny often brought sandwiches and coffee to the set, going around to everyone, checking on them as if the cast and crew were her little family. It was that simple warmth that made Sally see Rob had picked the right person to go through life with. And for that reason, Sally always had deep liking and respect for Penny in her heart, not as a rival, but as a kind woman who was in the right place at the right time, with full honesty. After All in the Family ended in 1979, Sally thought everything would slowly fade into quiet like so many showbiz friendships. But Rob did not go away. He called her a lot. Calls that came out of nowhere as if he had never left her life. There were no hellos, no polite how are yous, just Rob's voice jumping right into a dumb joke. Times totally random before hanging up before Sally could even answer. She would always freeze for a few seconds, then laugh out loud in the empty room. a laugh that felt both good and hurting at the same time. Sometimes Rob didn't hang up fast. He talked about new work, about stress, about feeling lost without the old filming schedule. I miss that feeling of everyone standing together under the lights. Rob once sighed over the phone. Sally listened without cutting in, only sometimes answering very softly. I understand. Those calls were not long, but they were enough to make her feel she was still part of his world, even if just on the edge. Sally kept the habit of waiting for the phone to ring late at night. Every time she heard Rob's voice, she felt like time had gone backward. Hey, Gloria, if you had a bad day today, just remember I've just told the worst joke of my life, he once said, his laugh mixing with the static on the line. Sally answered with a long laugh of her own, happy and sad mixed, as if it were a thin thread tying her to a part of her young days that had already gone. Everything really changed only when Rob met Michelle Singer and married her in 1989. After marrying Michelle and having 3 children, Rob's world closed in a whole new way. His new family life filled every empty spot of the day, every breath of the night. The quiet evenings once for phone calls and laughs were suddenly taken by kids crying, full schedules, and a tiredness that never went away. Rob stopped calling Sally, not because he didn't want to, but because there seemed no space left for wanting. In the new house, everything followed quiet rules. Michelle was very sensitive, her jealousy hanging in the air like tension. Just saying Sally's name was enough to change the mood. I don't like you bringing her up, Michelle once said, her voice cold and sharp. Rob stayed quiet. You didn't always say my always said. Berg only nodded a little. The nod of someone too tired to explain anymore. He started holding back. Old memories got locked up, old ties cut not by words but by long quiet. Once Rob picked up the phone, almost dialed Sally's number, then erased it. He sighed and said to himself, "It's just a call, but maybe I shouldn't." And so another night went quiet. The 3 kids brought joy, but they also wore Rob out in ways he never expected. He loved them until he was drained. Sleepless nights, grumpy mornings, the constant feeling of not being good enough slowly broke him down. Rob got quieter, smiled less, his eyes always looking at something far off. There were times when, after the kids slept, Rob sat alone in the dark living room, staring at his blank phone screen. He missed how Sally used to laugh loud at his stupid jokes. He missed feeling like himself, not a husband, not a dad, not the one holding it all up. Just Rob. "I miss you," he whispered into the empty room, knowing no one heard. The distance didn't come sudden, but like fog getting thicker day by day. Sally slowly became a name never said, a memory put in the deepest drawer of his mind. Rob didn't hate her, didn't deny her. He just made himself forget because that was the only way to keep going in the now. On one rare time, Michelle asked, "Are you still in touch with her?" Rob shook his head. "No," he said evenly. It was the truth, but a truth that hurt sharp. Michelle turned away happy, while Rob felt like he lost another small part of himself. As years went by, Rob became a different person to the world. Successful, busy, responsible. But inside, he got more empty. Old friendships didn't vanish from betrayal, but because there wasn't enough energy to keep them. He learned to live with that empty feeling, like a dull pain that never fully healed. The last time Rob Reiner called Sally was on a very late night, his voice lautky basat, ow and hoarse as if all his energy was gone. There were no usual starting jokes, only a long quiet before he finally breathed out and said, "I'm so tired, Sally." In that voice, she heard not just body tired, but the worn out of someone holding it together too long without help. Rob talked about the kids, about how he tried to be patient, tried to love them the best he could. He said he always gave in to them, always tried to calm things, but there were times when everything got out of control. Nick especially got angry fast, feelings exploding sudden, sometimes leading to fights that scared Rob. "I just want to protect them," Rob said very softly, as if explaining to himself. He admitted there were times he should have gotten outside help, but he didn't. "I can't," Rob whispered, calling someone to come and take my child away. "I can't stand that thought." In his voice was a blind, hurting kind of love, A love ready to take all the bad so his kids wouldn't get another hurt. Sally didn't cut in. She only listened. She could feel clearly Rob slowly fading into his roles as dad, husband, and the one in charge of everything. He no longer talked about himself, no longer asked about her. She put the phone down very slowly, didn't cry, only sat there a long time in the quiet room. Later life pulled them different ways, and their closeness slowly faded. "We didn't fight. We didn't break up," Sally said, her voice heavy with sadness. "We just," quietly, drifted apart. She turned to Jake and Rami, her look softening. "Rob was a good man, not perfect, but real. And whether you know it or not, he used to talk about you with a very quiet pride." Rami lowered her head, tears falling without sound. Jake tightened his hand, his jaw clenching. She turned back to the coffins. "Goodbye, Rob. Thank you for believing in me, even when I no longer believed in myself." No one stopped her. And maybe because everyone saw the pain in her voice was real, plain, not asking for pardon. Jake turned a bit toward Rami and whispered, "He used to mention Sally." Rami nodded a little, her throat tight as if all the pieces suddenly fit in the most hurting way. When the ceremony ended, Sally was the first to go. She didn't wait for anyone, nor look back. The door closed behind her, leaving a strange, empty feeling, not loud, not big drama, but hurting. That uninvited coming had stirred up things thought buried long ago, reminding everyone that some ties, even when not in daily life anymore, still come back at the most heartbreaking times. Jake was the one who threw the first handful of dirt into the grave. The sound of earth hitting wood was a dull thud like a door closing that he could never open again. He turned to Rami and said softly, almost no sound, "We did everything we could." Rami nodded, but the empty in her eyes showed she didn't really believe it. As people slowly left, only Jake and Rami stayed standing by the new grave. On the simple headstone were Rob's name and 2 short dates. There were no more tears now, only tiredness and a lasting hurting pain. The funeral was over, but for them, Rob's leaving was only starting to really hit. A wound that didn't bleed but hurt for the rest of their lives. So, what in the end was the relationship between Sally and Rob? Were they just co-workers, friends, or something more unclear that neither ever dared to name? How close must they have been that a phone call without hello was enough to make Sally laugh out loud in an empty room, and that Rob could tell her the deepest tiredness of his life? Sally Struthers was born on July 28, 1947 in Portland, Oregon, into a family that was far from happy. Her father, Surgeon Robert Alden Struthers, left when she was only 9 or 10 years old. She grew up with her mother, Margaret Caroline Joris, and her sister Sue in the quiet Concordia neighborhood in northeast Portland. Her mother worked hard at the Bonneville Power Administration to support her kids while also fighting bad depression. Sally once said, "My childhood wasn't as perfect as people think. I remember days when my mother would sit quietly in a corner of the house and all I knew to do was hold her without saying a word." Her mother worked long hours, tired and emotionally shut off, while Sally grew up with a constant feeling that she had to prove she was worth something. At school, she wasn't a kid who stood out for looks, but she had a special energy whenever she was in front of people. A drama teacher once told her, "You don't just act, you live inside the role." That sentence stuck with Sally for a long time. After high school, Sally decided to leave Portland for Los Angeles, a choice that was both risky and unavoidable. She took very little stuff, but in her heart was a strong want to be seen, to be noticed. During those early years, struggling with small parts and going through one failed tryout after another, Sally sometimes sat alone in her tiny rented room and wondered if she was chasing the wrong dream. "If I give up now," she whispered to herself, "what will I have left?" Sally's career started with small roles in the late 1960s. She danced on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour and showed up briefly in 5 Easy Pieces. It was there that producer Norman Lear saw her and asked her to try out for Gloria in All in the Family in 1970. That role changed everything. Sally clearly remembered the first script reading. I walked into the room and saw Carol O'Connor, Gene Stapleton, and Rob Reiner. I was shaking so bad I almost dropped the script. But when I read lines with Rob, everything suddenly felt natural in the weirdest way. Throughout the first 8 seasons of All in the Family, Sally and Rob became close friends on set. They often practiced lines together, fixed the script, and shared happy moments after each take, Sally Struthers once recalled, "Rob was a genius. He always knew exactly how to make the audience laugh at the right time. I learned so much from him. That closeness made them feel like siblings, but had it also accidentally caused some mix-ups." Rob Reiner's first wife at the time was actress Penny Marshall, who had also tried out for Gloria but didn't get it. Penny sometimes felt uneasy seeing how close Sally and Rob were. Rob once told it funny to Sally. "Penny told me that you're always laughing with me, always hugging me, so she thinks you might be up to something." Sally Struthers stated clearly that there was never any romantic thing or wrong relationship between them, only work friendship and mutual respect. After the series finished its main run in 1979, Sally and Rob kept in touch for a while. Rob sometimes called to check in and talk about new projects. While Sally always showed her pride in his growing talent as a director, she once said, "I was so proud to see Rob move into directing and do so great. He deserved every bit of it." Over time, though, personal lives, family duties, and busy careers made their contact less and less until it finally stopped, without any clear reason. Sally Struthers admitted that she never really got why the friendship faded like it did, but she accepted it as a normal part of life. In 2003, when the two ran into each other again at an event, Sally excitedly ran over to hug Rob like in the old days. This time, though, Rob kept distance, gave only a polite hello, and walked away quick, maybe to not make his second wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, feel bad. As for Sally herself, after All in the Family, success came fast and huge. 2 Emmy Awards proved her talent, but they also brought big pressure. She kept working hard after television movies, stage shows, voice work for cartoons. She was everywhere, yet the spotlight didn't shine as bright as before. There were times when Sally stood backstage at a Broadway theater listening to applause for someone else and felt like she was slow, moving away from the center. "Maybe fame has an end date," she said with a sad smile to her friends. Sally Struthers has always kept her private life very secret despite getting huge fame from playing Gloria in All in the Family. She married only once to psychiatrist William C. Rader on December 18, 1977 in Los Angeles. They met through an introduction by the wife of Carroll O'Connor, whom Sally saw as a second dad after her real father left when she was very young. In a rare interview, Sally once recalled, "After our first date, I fell madly in love. I was the one who proposed to him." That marriage brought Sally the biggest joy of her life, the birth of her only daughter, Samantha Struthers Rader, around 1980. At first, Sally hadn't planned on being a mom. She once shared, "I thought I would never have kids because I was afraid I wasn't patient enough. But then Samantha came, and everything changed totally. She is the light of my life." William had 3 kids from a previous marriage, Jonathan, Nathan, and Deborah. The family was once seen looking happy together at public events. William was very supportive of Sally's career and even co-wrote an episode of All in the Family. Sally described the early years of their marriage as very beautiful. "He was confident enough not to feel threatened by my income. We respected each other's personal space, and that was the best thing." However, less than 6 years later, they divorced on January 19, 1983. The reasons were never shared publicly, but the two kept a respectful relationship for their daughter. Samantha grew up mostly with her mom and later became a clinical psychologist and personal development expert. Sally once said gently, "We didn't divorce because we hated each other, but because we were no longer compatible. Samantha has always been the beautiful bridge between us." After the divorce, Sally never married again and didn't publicly admit any serious romantic relationships. She chose to live on her own, focusing on theater work, voice acting, and charity stuff. There were some old rumors that she briefly dated Elvis Presley before getting famous, but Sally laughed them off, saying, "It was just a fun time. He was very polite, took me out to dinner, but we were just friends." Today, at the age of 78, Sally lives quietly close to her daughter, Samantha, and enjoys a free life. She rarely talks about her personal life, but once shared, "I don't need a new man for Samantha, and I don't need one for myself either. My life is already full with the stage friends and the children I help through charity work." Beyond acting, Sally puts a lot of energy into helping causes, especially underprivileged kids around the world. She travels to far places and sees very real, very raw suffering. Those trips leave her both heartbroken and, in a way, healed. In her later years, Sally Struthers no longer chases the spotlight like she once did. But her life story still has the weight of someone who has lived fully and deeply with her feelings. The last public time Sally and Rob Reiner were together was in 2024 at the Emmy Awards ceremony honoring Norman Lear, the creator of All in the Family. Sally and Rob stood on the same stage, shared a few polite words, and smiled nicely. But it was clear that the closeness they once had was gone. The feeling between them had a gentle distance, like two old friends who had gone totally different ways. Although their relationship has faded with time, Sally Struthers has always talked about Rob Reiner with respect and warmth. She often says that Rob was the one who helped her grow as an actress and always advised her to put the success of the whole series above personal gain. There were never any public fights or problems between them. Simply time and life slowly turned that once close friendship into a beautiful memory in the E. And the relationship between Sally and Rob never had a clear label. They were not lovers, nor were they just passing co-workers. It was a connection made during their young days on the set of All in the Family, grown through surprise phone calls, and then quietly faded as life made each choose different roles. Maybe there are relationships that aren't meant to last, but only to remind us how deeply we were once understood. If Rob hadn't been so tired, if Sally had dared to hold on tighter, if time had been a little nicer, would their story have been different? Or is it exactly the unfinished part of it all that makes their relationship so touching? Between them there was no goodbye, no anger, only a long quiet that went across many years, and an unspoken regret neither ever said out loud. Thank you for staying until the final lines of this story. If you too were touched by unclear relationships, by feelings without names, yet very real like those between Sally and Rob, please leave a like or a comment to share how you feel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can keep listening together to stories that are sad, beautiful, and deeply human. Where memories are not forgotten, but retold with complete honesty.